You're listening to Inside iOS Dev, episode number 5, Setting Up Universal Links in Your Application. Hey everyone, you're listening to Inside iOS Dev, a show about real-world iOS development, here with your hosts Andrew Rohn
and Alex Bush.
And in today's episode, we're going to talk about setting up universal links in your application.
Yeah, so Andrew, what are universal links?
Universal links basically are Apple's new standard way of linking into your application. So if someone sends me a link to
myapp.com/profile/ID number.
Yeah, /ID number. So basically a link to a specific profile.
Mm-hmm.
If I have that app installed, I can tap on that link in Messages, in the Messages app, or in Slack, or in Safari if I see it in the Google search results or something like that, and it will link me directly to that place in my application, that profile in my application.
Right. So basically, that's the functionality-wise, it's similar to what we had before, which was custom URI schemes. Right. That's the old way of doing it, and I believe since iOS 9, right, Apple moved towards
iOS 9.
Right. Yeah, they pushed towards using universal links as the main way of implementing that functionality, because they're more secure, universal.
More secure than what though?
Oh, than custom URI schemes.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Because the problem with those schemes was that other apps could kind of hijack and also define that they handle your applications and your domain's URI schemes, and all sorts of weird stuff could come up.
What's a custom URI scheme look like though?
Typically, it's something like, let's say, Facebook, right, as an example,
right,
an application that would like to handle have deep linking functionality, right, in their iOS app. It would be FB, as far as I recall, FB column //
Yep.
And then, well, that's example profile /123, right?
Right.
To kind of identify that this is Facebook namespace, domain space, and that this is the URI scheme for a profile, right?
In Facebook,
yeah. But they were, again, right, they were not secure. Other people could hijack it. Other applications could define that they handle FB column // schemes, and basically get the data of people passing, like if inside of a URL.
So I can create my own, I don't know, app and be oh yeah, I can handle Facebook links. I'm Facebook. I can declare that in my app, and the user could click on it and then open my app
and then collect at least the data that was in the URL itself.
Right, which seems very deceptive.
Yeah, which might be sensitive information or not. It depends, but still not secure in that sense.
It's also not a good user experience.
Yeah.
And
that. And another big deal with URI schemes was that websites cannot natively support that as a fallback, right? Because it's not a real URL. It's a URI scheme, which doesn't have HTTP part to it, right? And you just cannot process it as a normal URL.
Right.
And unlike your universal links, which can and do look like a regular URL.
So yeah, I guess that's nice because let's say I want to share a link with you to deep link you into my application to see my profile, and I don't have the URI scheme, let's say, because typically you don't expose that to your users, I guess, of like, I guess for example, Facebook, it would be FB :/ and then maybe the profile ID.
Mm-hmm.
That would be weird for me to share to you, for you to click. It just, I guess, might look weird, as it wouldn't even look like a link maybe if
right.
the typical user wouldn't know what that is. So instead, I would just share an regular HTTPS link with you, and then you're like, okay, cool, and then click it, and then from there it can deep link them into the application.
Exactly. Or if they don't have it installed, they can be prompted to install the app, or they can continue in the browser and
In Safari.
yeah, and see, like, look at it as a normal web page. If your website kind of there's a fallback on that built in.
Right. So I guess that's where the name universal link
Right,
comes
yeah,
in,
yeah.
because it's a universal link. It's handled universally.
So yeah, and that effectively gives all of those benefits of. And another part to it that your website needs to kind of define and declare that it can handle that type of links and universal links and deep link into applications. Could be one or multiple, and that is declared on your website where you control it on at your domain name. So that gives you the security and privacy part to it, unlike URI scheme.
So basically, Facebook. So we're going to talk about the implementation details later, but I'll just for the sake of making the point now. Obviously, only Facebook owns Facebook.com, the domain, and you're going to have a file. Facebook is going to have a file on their servers telling Apple, hey, we will handle links. We'll handle universal links for Facebook, and these are, we'll handle them basically.
Right. And these are the paths that we want to handle.
Yeah, and these are the paths we're gonna. And so essentially, what that does is it makes it secure, because unless someone somehow takes over the Facebook domain name, it makes sure that only Facebook will now declare, hey, I handle these links.
Yeah.
Versus the URI, where the URI scheme, someone might say, I handle Facebook links that have this URI scheme like this. Right.
Yeah. But how do we actually implement it, right? That's the interesting part for us developers. And everything starts with kind of going from top, from the backend side in a way, from the server down to iOS client side.
So actually in Apple's docs, they lay out how to implement the universal links in your application, and they give these 3 broad steps. So on the first broad step, you're going to create this file called an Apple App Site Association file that just declares basically your application and the paths it handles. We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about all these steps later. And then the second broad step is you're going to upload that file to your server on the back end. And then finally, on the iOS side in your application, you're going to have to make some changes to accommodate for that you're going to handle these links essentially.
Right. And so starting with going into more details, starting with this Apple App Site Association file. This is the file that you need to create. The name has to be exactly Apple-App-Site-Association for that file, and it will contain JSON in it. Although it doesn't have a .json extension, it will not work if you put a .json extension there.
Right.
And the JSON inside, Apple gives you specific format for that JSON that you need to follow. But in the nutshell, overall, what you need to put in is a list of bundle IDs of applications that will be able to handle universal links for your domain, for your website. And you need to put a list of paths for deep linking within your app, right?
Right.
The paths for your URLs that can be handled by your iOS app, or your iOS apps rather.
Right.
And yeah, essentially, so you create that file, and the second part where you need to upload it to your server, and it needs to be first of all, your server needs to be, if you're on iOS 9 and higher version, then it needs to be, your website needs to be HTTPS secure, and or if you're on iOS 8, you encrypt your Apple app site association file actually. But regardless, your Apple app site association file needs to either be placed in the root domain. So in case of Facebook example, it would be facebook.com/apple-app-site-association, right? Uh, or in a well-known directory.
Well, yeah, it's the well-known subdirectory.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
So literally, the name is well-known.
Yeah, it's not just the one that you know very well.
Yeah.
I know the name of this file, so we could put it in there.
Yeah. So in that case, it will be facebook.com/well-known and / your file name, right? I'm not gonna repeat it again.
Yeah, I think they got it.
Right. And and essentially that kind of gives you an overview of your backend quote unquote setup for this.
Right.
So that like you declare for iOS system that, oh yes, those links and for those apps can be handled.
Right.
And be treated as universal links. And there is the iOS, last part to it is the iOS side of the equation.
Right.
Which is, what is it? Entitlements.
So if you go to the capabilities tab.
Right.
And you scroll down, you'll see one of the menus there says associated domains. You can flip that switch to on. And then in there you will see a list that you can add entries into. And into there you're going to add the various domains. Is it
subdomain variations?
Subdomain variations. So like one potential gotcha is in there you're gonna add mywebsite.com as one, and actually the format is applinks:/mywebsite.com.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also going to need to add applinks:/www.mywebsite.com. And another variation, if you have a subdomain,
right,
you're also going to do same thing, applinks:/subdomain.mywebsite.com. Those are all separate. You have to put those in there. You can't just put only one entry and expect it all to handle.
Right. Given that you would have links like that for those subdomains, right?
Given that you need to actually support those.
Right. And essentially, and the last part to it is updating the actual code, right? Updating app delegate with a new callback.
Right.
For user activity, as far as I remember.
Yeah, so the method is application continue user activity with restoration handler. And there you're going to receive a NS user activity object.
Right.
And on that object, it's going to have an activity type. And if you check the type is basically browsing web. That means that they came from a universal link. So that means on that activity object, you can then say, okay, I know they came from a universal link, therefore I know they have a URL that they came from. So the property that you get from the object is you access the web page URL. So now that's end to end. Now in your app, you have that web page URL. It'll be an NS URL. You have that NS URL in your application, and now however you do routing in your application, you can use that URL to send your users to the relevant page in your application.
Right. A few things to gotchas and things to keep in mind, just with the way it works, right? The universal links and how system handles it, regardless of like you doing anything about it, is like, let's say you have your link posted in Slack channel, right, or some other application like that. If users can tap on the link, and that by default, as far as I remember, will jump to Safari, and from there, if your website declares that this is one of the universal links, it's going to go to your application. But and everything is that's a happy path, right? But if the user long presses in that other application on that link and actually says open in Safari, then iOS system's going to remember that and open Safari from now on for those links.
Yep. Even if you set up everything right with the universal link setup.
Yeah.
And that could be maddening. You're looking at everything, seeing that you set it up correctly, and it keeps opening in Safari. So one thing is, make sure to reset what Apple basically remembers, I guess, is like a user preference of how they want to open those links.
Right.
Make sure at some point you long press on the link, and you go to your application and you click on it, and then now Apple will say, okay, I see that the user has the intention of wanting to open these links in the application rather than in Safari, and it will remember that setting. That's definitely a big gotcha.
Yeah, you could spend many hours on that. We did, certainly did.
You're not supposed to tell them.
Right.
Another interesting thing in a potential gotcha is the I'm just gonna say AASA file.
Sure.
Which is for Apple App Site Association. The AAS file is going to be it's downloaded when the user installs the application. So if you make changes to your AASA file and then upload that to your backend, I would recommend deleting the application and reinstalling it so that your application re-downloads it and gets those changes.
Right. Your users will get the changes with app updates, right? When you ship it to App Store, but for your development process, that's the best way we found, right? Just uninstall faster.
Right.
Another gotcha in a way, or a tip, I guess, would be for you, like the whole setup is a bit involved and convoluted, and you kind of want to make sure that at least step 1 and 2 were correct, which are the backend steps really not involved in iOS at all. For that, Apple has a
AASA, or like a link validator, basically.
Yeah, exactly. The open URL, universal links validator.
Right. Yeah.
And it's we'll link it in show notes.
Yeah. You basically just paste in your domain there,
and it checks if it's...
And it'll check if it actually handles the universal links.
Yeah, and if all the setup is correct, at least on the backend side.
Right.
Like for example, for us, one big thing was that when your domain or your AASA file needs to be publicly available without any redirects. So it should just get the file right away, right? Instead of doing 300 redirect and then giving you the file. That would not work. Right. And that validator will tell you if that's the case. And another thing, it will check HTTPS and so on and so on. So yeah, use that just to make sure everything's right. So yeah, then this is how you would implement universal links on iOS, and the main takeaway is really just be careful and follow the documentation, and even better, follow the checklist we put together for that.
Yeah, I think the reason why this is we're mentioning this as the key takeaway is because this is really actually in actuality not that complicated, and it's a relatively small amount of steps. But I just think that there's some edge cases and little gotchas that we mentioned in this podcast that hopefully will help others that you can get snagged up on. So I think that's why we're mentioning the key takeaways. Yeah, just take your time and follow the steps. Just like go through it. Don't try to like jump in halfway because you might have half implemented before. I think that's kind of what we did, and it really ended up costing us a lot of time.
Yeah, especially when you have different environments and different domain names for staging, production, and so on.
And in particular for us, we have a different URL for the staging environment we have, so it's a little slightly more complicated. But I think just take your time, follow the steps. So we're going to upload that file that Alex mentioned, and it's just going to be a checklist of all the things you need, all the steps you need to follow, and you just check them off. And it'll basically have what we talked about here in this podcast, as well as some of the gotchas. So I think that will be quite useful. And it's basically the way I'm making this checklist is if in a year from now, when I completely forget about how to implement universal links from scratch, I need to do it, I'm gonna go to this
Just
checklist.
look it up. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, guys. So this is it for this episode of Inside iOS Dev. Please give us thumbs ups,
Like, subscribe,
likes,
comment, review, rate,
all of it.
everything.
Yeah.
We need it all. Please
Will help greatly.
contact us at Inside iOS Dev on Twitter. Thanks, guys.